Okay, welcome back, and let's touch now. Pam, I'd love to do, a proper discussion on the sequels in the future on What the Hype, but now I'd like to narrow the scope down to the sequels in relation to the first film. How do you make a sequel to a movie that is self-contained in such a cool way? Sure, it ends on a cliffhanger, but what more would you want out of a movie like Back to the Future, and what parts of that do get delivered in the sequels?
Yeah, I think that it was so smart of them. It's so funny because Back to the Future 2 really shouldn't work, but it does. And the reason I say that is because they're basically just retelling the same story, but in the future. And they're changing one thing. It's like, what if, Biff went back in time? But a lot of it harkens back to basically what might have happened if Marty had completely messed everything up, right?
Yeah. Right.
But I just think that it's so smart of them to have just decided we said we were going to go back to the future, so let's actually go to the future. And again, what I was saying at the beginning of the show, it's just, I think that even though the first movie is so beloved, so much of when I think of this franchise, so much of what comes to mind right away comes from the sequel. And I think that it's just a byproduct of future being in the title. And so you just think well, the DeLorean's already futuristic in and of itself, but the self-lacing shoes, for example, or the hoverboarding and things like that. Yeah.
There's so much in consumer culture in the 80s. And so to imagine what that looks like in the 2015 year is also very cool. The self-lace, what products can we get out of the future,
and we didn't get any of it. Spoilers.
Oh, well, shoes that lace themselves would be kind of neat. Flying cars would be kind of neat, but seeing the way other people drive.
We have Velcro.
We do have Velcro. Yeah. But no, I mean, more accurate weather prediction maybe might be one of the few things that we have. I mean, not down to the minute, granted. The post office still sucks.
Do you know what I did love, which was very I mean, this is a prediction that ended up being true, is the Jaws 47. Not that there have been 47 Jaws, but just the sheer amount of sequels that have been made. It's almost like that was a self-fulfilling prophecy, and probably a bit of a tongue-in-cheek joke for
Spielberg.
The creators to put in there, because they already went into, the trilogy knowing that they wanted it to be a trilogy and that was it.
Yeah.
But that hasn't stopped every other franchise from continuing on. So I think that's pretty clever.
That's so clever. I think too, okay, so real talk, it was actually Back to the Future 2 that I've probably seen the most in my life and watched the most. Whenever there was a couple years in my childhood where when I wanted to watch Back to the Future, it would be part 2. And what I love about part 2 is it's essentially 3 different movies too, because the entire scene back in 1955, where the end of the film and we've got to prevent Biff from giving Biff, the almanac and get the almanac back to get back to the future. That all is an overlay of the first movie. And you have these characters.
Right, exactly.
That are there, so present day, quote unquote, Marty is interacting with his parents again, his youthful parents again, but as new present day Marty, and not the Marty that with the Calvin Klein character that was there last week. And so it really,
I was going to say, that's when you get some of these other rules of time travel that have really stuck, because there's so many different versions and variations of what time travel can be. And, a lot of times it's when you are having these conversations, what comes up is people go, is it Back to the Future rules? So it's you can't be seen. It's the same thing with Harry Potter is the same thing. It's you can't be seen when they go back.
So closed loop time travel. So everything that you do, you've already done, and
exactly.
there are
Yeah,
exceptions, and it's like you
but it
can't.
is funny that
Yeah,
it's that's kind of become, instead of saying closed loop, people will say like, is it Back to the Future
is it
rules?
Back to the Future rules? Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
No, right.
yeah,
That's their touch. It's like I think what I love about the sequel is it asks those questions. What would the future be like? What would
yeah,
the consequences be of somebody? Because like with great power of this, over time and space, what responsibility? What would happen if somebody uses something like the time machine, which is really value
yeah,
neutral, for self betterment and egotistical purposes? And so,
yeah.
you
And you
know,
also see like Doc even has a premonition of, because Marty, it we can basically agree that Marty is a good guy, right? He's not an evil character. And even Doc knows that like good people, going back with the power of knowledge, could have catastrophic ends, right? Which is why he's so upset that he wants to bring the sports
but
almanac
yeah,
back for himself to begin with. And
yeah,
then we get to see the consequences of that in the hands of somebody that isn't a good person, and how that completely changes. Yeah, exactly. Also, like we talked a little bit about Biff, but Biff in Back to the Future 2 is particularly delicious as like almost a Scooby Doo villain, in the way that he's like skulking around as the old man, and
yeah.
then you get like it's just so like
Giving the book to himself.
so good.
The
Yeah.
best part is that Biff doesn't like Biff. Like old
Right,
Biff doesn't like young Biff.
exactly.
No, he can't. You sound like a damn fool when you say it wrong. It's like
Yeah.
eventually, there was a come to Jesus where like Biff was like, okay, I was a loser as a kid. I have to learn better. But part of that, and I think we really need to shout out Thomas F. Wilson, who plays Biff.
Mm-hmm.
In the whole series, for the heart that Biff had. You would not see it, but like initially, and I think in the first movie at all, but there is heart. Like there are some people, some actors that play bad characters, or evil characters or dark characters, and I don't have such a read on them as people afterwards. But I think that when watching Back to the Future, and certainly by the time of the sequel where you get like the self-parody Biff version, you can tell that the actor is just like a good guy who
Yeah.
is playing a role that, he looks physically imposing, but when he's like, go to get my car, grandma, it's just like, oh, he's in on the
Yeah.
joke. He's in on the
Uh,
joke that
William
he
Zabka is
sucks.
another good example of that comes to mind. The Karate Kid, he plays Johnny Lawrence,
Yeah.
and that's why the sequel Cobra Kai works particularly well, because he's not really a bad guy. He just had a bad mentor.
He was coached that
And
way.
yeah, exactly. I don't know if you've had a chance to watch Cobra Kai, or if you're familiar with the Karate Kid franchise, but I feel like if you enjoy the idea of Biff and what the actor is able to do with that, I think that you would probably enjoy seeing the trajectory of those
Well,
two
I
back
love a
to back.
good redemptive arc
Yeah,
for
yeah.
characters, and even it's not that Biff gets there, but the height and the threat of Biff in the first movie is heightened in the second movie when he like runs his own casino and little empire.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's a film that does so much, and that's why Back to the Future 2 was always my go-to, because you get the 50s, you get the 2015s, you get the 80s, alternate 80s a little bit there. And so that was the reason that I would always rewatch 2. That said, it at some point, probably in mid-teenager years before I moved away from home, fell out of my favor. And I
Interesting.
began to really appreciate the third movie. I used to start
Mm.
watching more, and then what really happened is, ever since leaving home, I started appreciating the first movie again. For the reasons that we discussed earlier, the self-contained plot, sort of how iconic some of the lines just have been, the fact that it ages well. I really now would say that I greatly appreciate the first film, but the second one was definitely the one, and still to this day, that I've seen the most. And the thing about it is, though, that it's like it's dark. It's
It
dark.
is dark. Yeah, it's gritty in a way that the first one is it really is so whimsical. That's just the best way I can describe it. But you're right. For I mean, like in general, as a movie, the pacing incredible, jam packed, but no unnecessary story arcs. You were talking before about how like every line, even every like prop is meticulously placed and serves a purpose. There's nothing really that doesn't. Even down to the like the fact that like before we get back in time, there's the woman that's wanting to save the clock tower, and
Yes.
Jennifer asks like Marty, and he kind of brushes her off. Is like, when did that stop working? Why did that stop working? You know, so they set you up for success in that regard. And it's not that like other films have not succeeded in doing this, but I think it's just so rare, especially this day and age, for something to be, all killer, no filler in that way.
Oh yeah. That's such a great point. And it's from that flyer that they know exactly when lightning's going to strike. It's exactly how they get back to the future. If only they
Mm-hmm.
can harness their wits about them and do it. Like,
Yeah.
so clever. So let's touch on the third film, which I find to be utterly delightful and as well executed as the first two films, but it seems like
Okay.
maybe among general audiences and fans of the series that the third film is everyone's least favorite.
So that's the camp that I am in, and admittedly, I have not revisited Back to the Future 3 as an adult, but I know that we do want to do a part 2 where we kind of unpack both of these movies together. And so I'm excited to do that because I don't think I've seen this movie since maybe I was in my teenage years,
It's
like
so
early
good.
teenage
It's really
years.
so good.
Yeah.
It's
And I
so
and I
good.
feel like maybe it'll play better. Maybe I'll appreciate it more. Like you were saying that you grew to appreciate it more in a different era of your life. So
Yeah. Here's my pitch for Back to the Future 3, and in response to the question, is it everyone's least favorite and why? um the third film, they have a chance to be their characters, and because the plot, especially in the second one, where they have to go to the future, then they have to go to the past, then they have to go to the alternate present, then they have to restore the, there's so much going on. And in the first film, it's not breakneck, but Marty's trapped and needs to go back. And so you get the third film where Doc and Marty are in 1885 together, and Marty is there on a rescue mission for Doc, because it was, kind of against Doc's wishes. Doc didn't mind being marooned in the past. But there's a rescue mission. That said, there is a much more relaxed feel, and partly because there's so little technology. It's not, they still need to get back to the future, but they need to do it using old tech, that they basically have a week riding horses and visiting the local saloon. And really the plot of the film is more character based, because Doc falls in love. Doc has roots now in the past, and how to navigate that. I mean, Christopher Lloyd loves the third movie because it's the one that gave him the most to do. But I don't think that that is wrong in any way. I think that because Christopher Lloyd's Doc Brown is such an iconic character in Mad Scientist, seeing another side to him also affects Marty. Marty has to grapple with, maybe his best friend not wanting to come back with him to the future. And so there's a lot more going on in 3 that is 100% about emotions, and 100% less about the plot of time travel and mechanics of future, past, whatever. And so movie 3 ends up being, I think, the most successful at taking the time to go through who are these characters, in addition to having one of the absolute best action sequences, sustained action sequences, the train sequence at the end where they hijack a train and have to push the DeLorean up to 88 miles per hour to get it out right before it falls down a ravine, is and remains the best shot thing. I don't think anything looks as good as that. Even the end of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, where they're along the canyon, in the tanks isn't as fun to watch as the railroad sequence in Back to the Future 3. And so I
Hmm.
really, I've come to love Back to the Future 3, and I've come to actually like vehemently defend like it's as good as the first two. It's just about something different.
Okay. All right. Well, good for everybody to keep in mind if they're watching along with us. I know that I'll be thinking
Yeah.
about that as I revisit
Well,
it.
please do, and
Yeah.
I'm so excited to go into the sequels, with this primer sort of discussion that we've had, and to find, as always, new things, but come out of it and just be like, all right, Pam, what do you think of movie three? Especially since it's
Yeah,
been
for
so
sure.
long. Like I rewatch them like every year, every other year. But since it's been that long since you've seen three, like any film
Yeah.
that I've taken 10 years off of and gone back to, like Fight Club, it's a totally different
Completely
experience.
different experience. Yeah.
Yeah. So I am giddy. You have to text me when we do
To
this.
be continued for
Yeah.
everybody else. You'll get a
To
sneak preview.
it's gonna be great. But yeah, really going through, we're gonna go more through the sequels later. But I'm so glad that they exist, and I'm glad that they stopped at three. That's just so rare now. You don't see that in Hollywood at all.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true.
But well, cool. I am wondering if there's anything else that we haven't touched on that you'd like to touch on.
Yeah, I feel like we did a really good job talking about almost everything. I mean there's always so much more, but yeah, I think this is a great place to wrap it. I don't know. What do you think? Did we miss anything?
I'm looking through the doc, and I'm thinking, what were our favorite moments from the first film to touch on
Oh,
stuff?
okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think for me it would be like when the first time we see the DeLorean, and part of that has to do with the score. You know, we talked a little bit about Huey Lewis and the News's involvement, but the score to this I think really is just like the beating heart of Back to the Future. I think that it's as integral as a lot of these other bigger things that we
yeah.
talked about in
A
terms of like
non
why
John
it's so
Williams
beloved.
score. Yeah,
Not a John Williams score, yeah.
it's
It's
Alan
Alan.
Silvestri.
Who's Alan
Silvestri.
Silvestri? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And then like Doc and the Clock Tower too at the end, and just like I think that that's just
God.
like so good. And like everything with like he thinks he's got it, and then the trees like making the cord just a little bit short, and he has to come down. It's just so good. It's just like there's so many beats like, and I'll just say this really quickly before we wrap, that I feel like, if you're watching this movie for the first time in 2025 or beyond, it'd be really easy to feel like it's overdone, right? Or like you've seen it before, but you kind of have to think about it as like Back to the Future was really the touchstone for a lot of this. And so, like, if you feel like you've seen other movies do it since then, it's probably because they were
They're riffing
inspired
off
by
Back to the Future.
certain beats and stuff. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, it'd be interesting to see too, like even just time travel as a device, as a
Yeah.
plot device, how Back to the Future kind of serves as its own sort of primer for some of these concepts of, whether it's time guardians, whether it's possible to change your future, whether it's any of
Mm-hmm.
that, and then through our characters. To your point, now that people say like, well, is it Back to the Future rules? As like
Yeah.
distilling down kind of a wonky, detailed science heavy thing into an action adventure plot. uh
Yeah. Easily digestible, you know?
yeah, yeah. So there's a lot
Yeah.
to it, and I would agree with you, the favorite scenes being at the end with the clock tower 100%,
Yeah.
because you get to see Doc, even youthful, like younger I don't say youthful, younger Doc, being the being able to succeed in helping his friend who he doesn't even know yet, to have a success so early on in his life, and be able to be everything he needs to be, even at youth, and to be able to roll with the punches, and fix things, to succeed early on, is the way in which the journey inspires all the characters, and the way in which all the characters learn from what happened is, I think, also pretty unique. or something that you really love the movie about. So I think that will conclude our initial discussions on Back to the Future, and I'm again looking like hell forward to getting you to watch the third one, but also the sequels and coming back and discussing more on What the Hype. And
yeah, it should be fun.
Yeah, we want to thank all of our listeners and viewers on YouTube for doing that and joining us. And again, please be sure to like and subscribe on YouTube and follow us on our socials, and you'll get new episodes. What else is coming up, Pam, shortly?
Ooh, you know what? Maybe have Laura cut that because I'm not sure when this is coming out. Oh,
We will
you know
cut.
what? Yeah, it might be.
Cut.
Laura, cut this. Okay, let's cut it. Yeah, I was going to say it
Listeners,
might
viewers,
be
yeah, we'll
the
hit
recap,
a
the
marker.
SDCC
Cut,
recap.
mark,
but...
cut, cutting out. Sorry, you know what? I fully asked. I walked right into that question knowing full well that we are due to have a meeting where we plan out what's coming next.
Yeah, but I'm not sure, but I think it might be after this would be the Comic-Con recap, but I'm not sure when this will come out. So let's,
you know what? Okay, then I could say what else have we recently done? Can I ask that question?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. So Pam, what else have we recently talked about on What the Hype that we want to draw everyone's attention to?
Ooh, well, we did talk about the Beetlejuice episode. That's a few months old at this point, but still worth revisiting if you want a dose of that nostalgia. We have a Wednesday primer if you want to get ready for season 2, which is coming out in early August. We talked about our favorite TV dads. That was really fun as well.
That was great.
Yeah. So lots of great stuff over here on the pod, and we're really excited for some upcoming episodes as well. So stay tuned, and thank you so much for following along as we continue to unpack all aspects of pop culture every week.
Absolutely. So until next time, again, our social media channels are What the Hype Podcast on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and Twitch. We are What the Hype Show on X because we're different. Our website is whatthehypepodcast.com. And if you want to email us your thoughts on Back to the Future, please do so at whatthehypepodcast@gmail.com. And you know what? You don't need to put spoilers in the subject because Pam has seen them all. So it's very exciting. Hashtag Protect Pam was fun while it lasted, but now we're all full balls to the wall on our emails. So thanks to everyone, and that was the hype for Back to the Future.
All right.
Tell me all about your greatest obsession.